Thank you. Each of us holds a story, one that has the power to motivate and to inspire. And I would also argue that our stories are not just personal experiences, they're forces capable of leaving a lasting impact on the world and on those that hear them. If you think about it, stories are a part of who we are. Whether it's a book or a movie or history, stories ignite our imagination and help us develop our understanding of the world. They remind us that we're not alone, that others have struggled, overcome, and persevered. But all too often, we keep our stories hidden. We fear judgment. We convince ourselves that our experiences don't matter. And when we do that, we limit the power of our voices, not just for ourselves, but for those who need to hear them the most. And today, what I would like to do is share the story with you of when I learned this lesson firsthand. When I first arrived at Holy Cross, I did everything I could not to stand out. I knew that Holy Cross was a special place and that I wanted to be here. But I was a young African-American man, an athlete, on a campus that at the time was not very diverse. Facts that often generated painful stereotypes that I wanted to avoid. I was also a first-generation college student from humble beginnings. And I didn't want anyone to know my story because that story is complex. And I feared that if people knew my story, it would just be another reason for them to see me differently. So over the course of 4 years, I kept to myself. I sat in the back of classrooms. After practice, I would rush down from the Hart Center to make it to Kimball before dinner ended. After dinner, I would put my sweatshirt back over my head and make my way up the steps of dining library to hide away in the stacks to study until it was time to do it all over again. When I graduated from Holy Cross, I went on to Boston College Law School and earned a law degree. I ultimately joined the United States Department of Justice as an assistant United States attorney, where it was my job to prosecute crimes against the United States. And it was there I found myself prosecuting a young man. This young man was 19 years old at the time. He had grown up around violence. His parents struggled with addiction. He was the youngest of 2 siblings, and his father and older brother were already incarcerated. This young man was being charged with a drug crime and facing over 15 years in prison. And to make matters worse, he was a new father. I've come to believe that justice is more than about punishment. It's about creating the space for redemption. But in this particular case, in order for me to make that argument effectively, I had to share my story. I was born and raised in Florida. Both of my parents grew up in the segregated South with little formal education. We lived in a low-income neighborhood where violence was a part of everyday life. By the time I was 12, I was already hanging out with the wrong crowd. And one day, me and my friends got in an argument with some older guys. We went home thinking that it was over, only to find out that our lives were in danger. Shaken, I called my older brother, who had just moved to Massachusetts. He was 26 years old, newly married, himself a new father. But without hesitation, my brother and my sister-in-law emptied their savings account, put me in a hotel for the night, and put me on the first flight to Boston. As I sat behind my desk thinking about how I was going to handle this young man's case, I again hesitated at sharing that story. I thought, would people see me differently? Would it even matter? But as I was thinking that, I thought about all of those individuals who shared their story with me along my journey and how those stories gave me strength. And I thought, maybe my story can do the same for someone else. In particular, I thought about my mother, who after having a stroke, doctors told us that she would never speak again. She refused to accept that. She fought and pushed through and proved them wrong. My senior year in high school, after a celebrated football career, going into the senior year with a lot of hopes and expectations, the third game of the year, I suffered a devastating knee injury. Two doctors told me I'd never play football again. But I remembered my mother's strength and her stories of perseverance. And I sought a third opinion. And that doctor recommended what at the time was an experimental procedure, a tendon transplant. So at the age of 17, after 2 surgeries totaling approximately 16 hours, I fought my way back to the field. And I always remember standing on fit and field after my last game my senior year, an all-conference selection, grateful for my mother's example. I also thought about Francis O'Connor, Holy Cross class of 1950. Frank signed up to be my mentor as a part of Holy Cross's alumni mentoring program. Every Sunday, Frank and his wife Ann would welcome me into their home, where Frank would spend hours telling me his story. The son of Irish immigrants, a veteran, a first-generation college student from humble beginnings, to a father of 10 and a justice on the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. Through those conversations, Frank taught me that at the heart of the legal profession is service and integrity. My mother died unexpectedly my first semester of law school. The grief was crushing. But again, it was my mother's stories of perseverance that gave me the strength to push through and finish what I had started. And I remember giving the eulogy at my mother's funeral and being surprised when I looked up to see Ann and Frank standing in the back of the room. And I remember Ann taking my hand and saying, although I've never met your mother, I knew her story. And as a mother myself, I knew that I had to be here to celebrate her life. As I thought about these memories and these experiences, I knew what I had to do. I had to advocate for this young man and share my story to give him a chance at redemption. So I did. And the judge handed down a sentence that held the young man accountable, but gave him a second chance. I learned something important from this experience, that our stories are not ours. They're meant to be shared. They have the power to inspire and even change lives. Our stories are the fabric that make up the tapestry of human experience that connects all of us through generations and across any perceivable differences. At Holy Cross, we're taught to think deeply, to be men and women for others, and to use our voices for good. Storytelling is a part of that. So if I can leave you with anything today, let it be this. Own your story. Don't be afraid to share it. Your experiences, your struggles and triumphs could be the spark that ignites someone else's transformation. Thank you.